read a lot of different kinds of novels in 2024, and I thought that it would be really fun to see how my reading habits changed throughout the year. There are 5 books that I'm not going to be talking about in this video, just the Sarah J. Maas books that I read. She gets enough publicity, everyone knows about her. I just don't feel like promoting her on my page, so I'm not going to. To get started, the first book that I read in 2024, that was Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White. I started the year off with this book, and what can I tell you about it literally a full year later? There is queer and trans rep, there's a character that uses Zerzem pronouns, which I hadn't encountered in literature before. It literally didn't impact the story in any kind of form. It wasn't disruptive. There's themes of religion and religious intolerance from a fundamentalist cult, religious trauma from association with said cult, and anti-trans rhetoric and transphobia, so just keep that in mind if you do decide you want to read this. The main character is undergoing his own kind of ultimate transformation, not only in the biological, physical sense, but also socially as he interacts with peoples that understand and respects his identity, even as he's slowly mutating. There's also autism representation and pride flag collections of bee lizards, which is pretty cute. I really enjoyed this book. On top of the themes, there's also a lot of action and gruesome, gory depictions. So, like I said, please keep that in mind. I think I gave this one a 5. That being said, I don't remember a lot of the plot progression of the story. Like, I know where it starts and I know where it ends up, but I don't remember a lot of the in-between. And that, I think, is due to it being a lot about the main character Benji himself and his feelings about himself and what he's going through, and just trying to survive in this apocalyptic end of the world. Then, like 2 months later, I read Songbirds and Snakes by our Lord and Savior Suzanne Collins. I actually put this one off mainly because I was afraid that I was going to be disappointed by yet another prequel, and I didn't want that to reflect on the original series. But I'm happy to report that that did not happen, and I am eagerly awaiting Sunrise on the Reaping to come out this year. I'll probably buy both books at the same time so I can have the full collection, because I've had the main series since I was like 11, because that was the first book set that I was ever gifted as a child. But it's mostly just Snow thinking about things and scheming and manipulating and trying to control not only the narrative but also the people around him. I liked Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, but it kind of felt like the author was beating me over the head with the themes. This was the first book by R.F. Kuang that I have read, and I was really into it at the beginning. It was stressful, and the FMC was obviously purposely disgusting and insufferable. I just felt like it kind of dragged before the big ending, so I was quite literally begging R.F. Kuang to reveal the twist that you could kind of see from a mile away. I know most of this was on purpose, but I feel like authors should trust their audience to interpret the cues of their themes and meanings rather than give me their exact stance to metaphors in. I think it gives me a lot more to ponder over the book and a lot more interpretation, if that makes sense. But I will be reading more from R.F. Kuang. I do want to read Babel because I still haven't read that one. Then I received an advanced reader copy of Your Coffin or Mine by Jacqueline Hyde, which is such a cute pen name, but I was really excited for that. It's a paranormal vampire human rom-com. So you can read my long review of it on Goodreads, but I could not finish this one. I know this is on a list of books that I finished in 2024. I know I technically did not finish this one, but I read 60% of it, and I'm going to include it because it took me so long to get even 60% in that it put me in a reading slump, I just think it should count. I think it should count. So it does. Now, there were good parts to it. So there were brief comedic scenes, and I'm saying brief because while the scenes themselves were not brief, the comedy in it was. They went on way too long, and they got pretty uncomfortable. Like the first scene where the FMC and the MMC meet, she's like walking around in the hotel. I guess I should set it up a little bit. There's a hotel in Romania that Dracula is running, and she is the first one that shows up before they've even had their grand opening. But basically, she's walking around the hotel without a bra on, and the MMC quite literally makes direct eye contact with her chest area and just stares and tells her that she needs to cover them up. Like that's supposed to be endearing, and like literally takes her to go buy clothes to cover up with. And she's like super affronted by this at first, and then barely thinks about it again because the insta lust kicks in. And it's like, where did it even come from? And it's not even just one time. He talks about being able to see her nipples more than once to her also. But that's not even like the worst of it. That's just an example. There's also, I'm not even kidding, one stereotypical gay man who is, I don't even remember his name. I don't remember anything about him other than he runs like a dog influencer account, and basically the only reason that he's there is to drool over the male characters, make innuendos about them, and scheme to get the main pair together, which they don't really need anyway. They're like instantly boning. It was meaningless. There was like barely any plot. They had something going where the FMC was like running away from her fuckboy marriage, and the spice wasn't even that good. I just don't want to talk about this one anymore. I just really did not like it, and I do not get the hype. There was like no plot to it. It literally just did not matter. Anything that they might have had going was gone within like 2 pages. I just couldn't take it. Then I read A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen, which is a Viking-inspired romantasy. It's got a pretty cool magic ability system where basically if parents conceive a child with a god in their presence, I'm remembering this very loosely. I have not read it in like 8 months, but their baby has the chance to be born with like a kernel of that god's magic, which is activated by saying that god's name. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 stars, but it's kind of like your typical romantasy. Like, you know what you're gonna get by reading this. It was pretty predictable. I did really like the chemistry between the MMC and the FMC, and I did like the writing style. I actually recently bought the Bridge Kingdom because I liked how Jensen writes. I'm probably going to be reading the second book that comes out this year, but I think I'm going to retroactively change the starring of the first book to a 4 instead of a 5, because I feel like if I really liked it and I think it's a 5-star, I should remember a lot more of it than I do. That's what this is for. That's what this is for. That's basically what we're doing in this video though. I'm going through the books that I read. If I can't remember it and I gave it a 5-star, it shouldn't be a 5-star, in my opinion. I've been trying to be more mindful of my ratings recently and a little bit more critical in my reading, I guess. I do have a bachelor's in English and creative writing, and so like after a year and however long of just reading whatever I wanted, because I had been reading so many required texts over 4 years, I don't want to forget what I learned. So why not just start publicly talking about books to make myself think about them? Alrighty, then I read Funny Story by Emily Henry, which, like all Emily Henry books, you know what you're gonna get with them again. I am a slut for fake dating. I loved The Love Hypothesis, and this one was no different. The premise of two people getting together because their respective partners left them for each other is so crazy and so messy. I had a really good time reading it, but also I did give this one a 5 as well, but I think a 3 is going to be good. I think I'm going to take it back to a 3 because I remember that the third act miscommunication really annoyed me, and I can't really distinguish this book from the other books other than the setting. Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield is a beautiful sapphic novella that follows Miri and her wife Leah's relationship. Leah is a marine biologist whose submarine sinks to the bottom of the ocean under mysterious circumstances, and Miri is trying to cope with that fact for months while her wife is missing. And then the book also jumps forward in time to show us how Leah has completely changed upon her return home and how Miri has to learn how to take care of her and communicate with her and ultimately love and let her go. I loved how both characters felt very different from one another and how we never actually get to see how they are together in the present when Leah is herself from the past. We only get to see their relationship in the past tense. And in Leah's point of view, she's thinking over her life as she's trapped underwater with a suspiciously large amount of food for 3 people on the, I think it was supposed to be a month voyage. Originally, one of them keeps hearing things on the outside of the submarine, and while this is going on, Miri is joining a husband off to space type roleplay community and finds comfort with her own situation as she reads these women's fictional stories of their husbands being in space for years and watching them argue with each other because sometimes they say things that aren't realistic. And then we get to watch Miri deal with Leah's new persona and way of life when she finally does return after 6 months. And I really fell in love with the relationship shown between these women and the way that they acutely know the other, and how Miri struggles with reconnecting with how different Leah is. I saw that Armfield recently came out with a new book called Private Rights, which apparently is a reimagining of King Lear, so I'm super interested in reading that this year. Then I read The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. This one was a huge disappointment for me in 2024. I am so sorry. I bought this one because it had those pretty sprayed edges at my bookstore, and it was the exact opposite of what I want. Let me set the scene. We meet our FMC. She's wanting to marry the king and gain power and kill him. Cool, love that. So she goes to her first ball, where women have been going for however long and had no success with gaining the king's attention. The FMC decides that she is going to wear the color black to stand out. Okay. He notices her because of it, just like she knew he would. And so suddenly, she's staying at the castle. So she starts living in the castle. The next day, everyone else is wearing black, but she's not. And she keeps, throughout the book, she keeps talking about wearing pants under her dresses, and it literally just keeps me thinking about the extreme layering epidemic of Disney in the 2010s. I know you know what I'm talking about. It just really gave me the ick. She also extensively talks about every single outfit that she wears, which is fine. It's just she keeps wearing the same thing over and over. There's only so many times I can think about someone wearing pants under skirts. I'm thinking of huge ball gowns and jeans. That's what it makes me think of. That's how it was described. Oh, and then Not only does everyone wear black after she wears black and gets the attention of the king, every time she wears a different color, everyone else wears that color the next day, and she talks about it every single time. Also, literally nothing matters in this book. There's a couple of conflicts that come up, and the conflict in the actual summary of the book doesn't matter. Okay, this is a little bit of a spoiler. But I feel like I just feel like it kind of reins in what I'm saying about this. She, for a large part of the book, is worried about being found out for killing this guy because he didn't want to be with her anymore. And when the king finds out about it, he just pardons her. That's it. And all of the other plot conflicts are exactly like that one. Nothing matters in this book. There is non-subtle, pointed conversations about the patriarchy and feminism. There's also a few queer side characters where they aren't scrutinized in the slightest, which I do like. I love reading, commentary on homophobia and the queer community itself, but sometimes, especially in fantasy novels, because I've read so many of them, I do like when people are just queer and that's it. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I did hate finish this novel because it just pissed me off. And then I literally gave it to my mom because she was talking about wanting to read it and I didn't want her to spend money on it. So, good riddance. I hope she likes it. I read My Throat, an Open Grave by Tori Bovalino, which was a very fall vibey, surreal book. And honestly, I really should have read it in the fall. I'm pretty sure I read it sometime in June. But I really like this one. It's about a town where a character called the Lord of the Woods lurks on its borders. This town follows a puritanical and patriarchal set of beliefs and believes that if they do not act in a holy manner at all times, that the Lord of the Woods will abduct them to his realm and do with them what he pleases, which coincidentally usually takes the children born to unwed women. So Leah, the FMC, accidentally wishes her brother away while she's taking care of him one night and is tasked by the townspeople to go and retrieve him at all costs. So she goes through this ritual and finds herself in the Lord's Woods. The Lord of the Woods isn't exactly how the townsfolk depicted him to her. He just tells her that she has a month to make him a song and that once she fulfills that bargain, she can have her little brother back. And her little brother is literally fine. He is staying with this family who seems to love him and cherish him. And Leah has a hard time with this, knowing with what his life was like at their mom's house. She begins seeing the ghosts of the previous girls who had never returned from their own missions and uncovers bits about herself and them in these very surrealist, magical ways. There are a lot of little ghosts around, and there's a garden of memories, and there's a whole town of people that live with the Lord of the Woods. It's very low key, but it was a very dark and beautifully written book. I loved the cast of characters, and it showed the bond between female friends in it also. I loved watching and learning what had happened to the previous women and how Leah learned what she could do to survive in this surrealist space where things just are the way they are. I gave this one a 4 because it is a little bit slow around the 40ish% mark, but it is something that I'm going to be getting a physical copy of as a trophy for my shelf. Then I read the Osawa Murders by Riku Onda, and it got 2 stars from me. I'm a little unsure if it was just the way that it was translated, but I had a really hard time connecting with the characters. It had a kind of documentary style to it with interviews with people who had been close to the huge family homicide that happened. And there's also like personal testimonies. It kind of just added to the mystery of the family's murder. And the murder itself was, cool. Every person in the family dies at the same time after they have a toast, except for the blind daughter of the parents. The reason I started to feel iffy on this one was because the information given to the audience is really repetitive, but it's offered up like we hadn't heard it before. There's also a point where we're in the head of an investigator, and he literally has never been to this house before. He's looking through here, looking at all the dead bodies on the floor, seeing how all the furniture is messed up from people running around. He just looks at this chair and says, "This chair hasn't been disturbed while everyone else was in here dying. The murderer must have been sitting in it." And like, how would you know that? Why would you think that? You've never been here before. I gave this book away at my local pottery painting place. They had like a paint and book swap night that I went to. It was very cute. Let me show you what I made. I made this one. It's Beach Read by Emily Henry. I painted it. It's so cute. I did use a stencil. I wasn't going to use one originally. Me and my husband got there late because we had went to a Renaissance fair that same day, and they had a stencil for it, so I did use that. But isn't it so cute? It's a vase. It's a little flower vase. And I have 3 cats, so I don't really keep flowers because they just eat them. But I keep my little annotation stickers and some of my bookmarks in here. Like these cat bookmarks. I got these for Christmas this year. Are they not so cute? Look at that one. They're so... This is the one I've been using. He just glares at you. They're so cute. And I kind of just display it. But yeah, I made this one. And then my husband made this Death Note one. They're really cute. We did not look at the prices of these before we painted them, so it did end up being kind of expensive, but it's fine. It's fine because they're cute. But basically, I brought a couple of books so that I could swap them out for a couple of books that other people brought. And after I left, I realized that in this specific book, I had sticky noted the place where he looked at the chair, and I literally was like, how the fuck would he reach this conclusion? And I left that sticky note in there. I hope that didn't annoy the person who picked it out. I hope that they liked it. Other than that, once everything was revealed at the end, there's like a random, out of the blue, religious abuse conclusion. I'm not really gonna get more into it because that's just gonna spoil the ending. But it was just very underwhelming overall. I'm sorry again to Lady from Pottery Night. I know we were supposed to bring books that we like, but I had cleaned through my bookshelf the week before, and that was the best one out of the bunch. So then I switched it up by reading Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. Not gonna lie, the cute pink coloring of the book really drew me in. It's about an AI sex bot girlfriend that begins developing human sentiments and thoughts, kind of per usual for this kind of story. Her owner, Doug, acts just like you imagine he's going to. He chooses her outfit, she plays traditional roles, but has issues in the cleaning department since he opted to have her both as a sex robot mixed in with the other kinds of robots that company produces. So there's other like versions of them that like clean or will be a nanny and things like that. So Annie becomes increasingly uncomfortable with Doug having her put on weight, take off weight, and she learns more and more about herself as an AI and learns about her coding. That leads her into learning how her own body works and bodily autonomy and it's a very human look into identity and sense of self and self-worth. I was surprised and really liked the twist of the ending. It was a very solid, quick read that I recommend for commentary on like beauty and the traditional roles of women, desire, and self-awareness. I think I gave Annie Bot like a 4-star. It was really good. Can you hear my cat? What do you want? He wants to go outside. He's not allowed to go outside. He's never once lived outside. He has been in my house since he was 4 weeks old. There he is. You better leave stuff alone, mister. Whenever he wants something, he likes to try and knock my pictures off the walls and stuff and like kind of smack things. So Bride by Ali Hazelwood was an easy like 2.53. I am all for a fated mates vampire werewolf relationship with the addition of alpha omega terminology. She's not an omega, but there is also that sort of connection with the Omegaverse when it comes to sexual acts. If you have read your share of alpha omega Wattpad stories, like the original ones from like the 2010s, you know what I'm referring to when I let you know that there is nodding. But anyway, I think the reason I didn't super vibe with this one was because it was just kind of really predictable. If you've read literally any Fated Mates, you know what the twist ending is. It just didn't wow me, but that is to say, it also wraps with a super neat bow, and the conflict is just explained in a monologue at the end. Love her STEM books though. Love theoretically is superior, and I will die with that book in my coffin. Thank you. Then I received the advanced reader copy for Thrum by Meg Smitherman. I, again, am resolved to say it did not meet my expectations. I have a long rant on this one as well on Goodreads. I gave it 3 stars because it had me, and then it lost me, and then it picked up a little bit, and then it completely lost me. So my main thing with this was that it was a novella, and I'm not saying novellas themselves are bad. I just didn't know it was a novella going into it because I literally only read the summary and then applied for the ARC. But what I am going to say is that I really deeply, truly think that this being a novella and not a full-length novel hindered it. I really think that this could have been helped with an extra 100, 150 pages. I just did not give a fuck about any of these people. I didn't care about the crew. The narrator is already unreliable. Nothing is explained. The twist is good. The writing is beautiful and eerie and creepy. Smitherman was very, very good at eliciting emotions about the unknown of space and how we're equally scared to be alone as we are to not be alone. I just didn't enjoy the shock of the ending. It just opened a lot more frustrating questions for me. Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman also got a 3 from me, and I know this might shock you, but I liked the movie way better. I went into this with the Sandra Bullock of expectations, and let me just tell you now, it was not bad. It was not a bad book in the slightest. Like I said, I gave it a 3, but I just really wanted a midnight margarita time, and this was more of a they met eyes and are instantly in love, mixed with real and raw depictions of sisterhood and being a single mother to 2 daughters, and then familial bonds between women. There's men in the story, but they're not super important other than that they instantly fall in love with these women like a spell, like those shows where you sniff a pie on a windowsill and float over to it. There's still the murder of Jimmy, which is mostly inconsequential and the aunts are barely involved in the book. It's mostly focused on the relationship between, I can't remember what their names are, I'm so sorry, Sarah and Nicole's characters, both as children and in the present as adults, and then Sarah's own children as they grow up. Oh my god, her name is Sally. What's the sister's name? I'm just gonna use the actors' names. I'm so sorry. And then Sarah's children as they're growing up. Sarah also lives in a house with her children in like a completely different state. They just annually visit the aunts. So the aunts are only really involved like when Sarah and Nicole are children, and then at the very, very end. It only took me like 2 days to read, but it kind of put me in a little bit of a reading slump. And the magic was also kind of just like, and for some reason this happened, and not given much thought, which there are like spells and stuff like that. It's just not as practiced as like the movie, if that makes sense. Then I read the first 2 books in the Ember in the Ashes series by Sabaa Tahir. The only reason I haven't finished the last 2 books is because I know they're going to destroy me, and also around this time I was really getting into literary fiction and watching a lot of literary fiction recommendation videos. So I am going to be finishing this series this year and then reading Air also, which has been sitting on my shelf just kind of watching me read other books I'm obligated to, because I'm kind of like, I'm ready to read it, but I've got things to read. I have things that I want to read first. Maybe I'll talk about the series as a whole later, but I've given both of the first books 5 stars. I've never been so stressed in my life. I'm excited to get into the rest of it, just not right now. I also read a middle grade book, Front Desk by Kelly Yang. I don't typically read middle grade, but this was part of my banned books group. I don't typically read middle grade. I do not have children, and I am not the target audience, but if I did have children, I'd be fine with them reading this. I don't really see what the big issue is. I'm pretty sure it's for like 4th graders. I don't see what's so wrong about talking about racism, classism, and immigration and the treatment of minority peoples by the police in a child-friendly way. It is based on the real life of the author, who immigrated when she was a child and ran a motel with her parents. She also went to college at the age of like 13 and now is the founder of the Kelly Yang Project, which teaches children effective communication and debate. I've not really looked a lot into that, but it was fine. Then I read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. It was okay. I think I gave it like 4 stars. I kind of want to give it 3 now because I'm not feeling totally great about the rating thinking back on it. I was kind of drawn to the story because of how it's told. It's told through like interviews and a Netflix special and a podcast, and then the 2 main characters themselves. I finished this in like a day, finished it in like the early hours of the morning, and usually that would mean that I really enjoyed it. But the more that I think about it and the more I reflect on what I think is true in the story, it just kind of becomes like a convoluted mess because, like the title says, you don't find out what's actually true for any of it. Literally any of it. I know it's so everyone can have their own interpretation on who is right or not, but I just kind of found it unsatisfactory. It was very obvious what was going to happen, and the twist was kind of just like, yeah, you know? And then there's also like a backwards epilogue to make you feel bad for someone. There's also a conversation about What's-Her-Face's husband for grooming her because they got together when she was like 15, or they met when she was 15. It's kind of glossed over, and I don't know if it's supposed to be like commentary on the true crime community itself, but it just felt a little bit icky because everyone was like, it's okay because he's a good dad. And I just didn't like that. I think I'm going to lower my rating to a 3. Maybe it'd be better to read the audiobook. I've heard good things about that. Then the fourth book in the Beast of the Briar series came out by sister authors Elizabeth and Helen, which is also their pen name. I know you're going to be like, why were you disappointed in this? It's a reverse harem. What are you expecting? I don't know. For the plot to be consistent, at this point, I'm a little unsure if the first 2 books were actually good because I also had problems with the third one. I don't know if it's because maybe I read them when I was first getting back into reading after college or what. I have a very long rant review about this one on Goodreads, so you can go there if you want to read that one. I don't have the energy to go over the issues I had with this book. It also super sucks because they finally got picked up by an actual publisher and aren't self-publishing anymore. I bought the pretty Blackwell editions of the first 4 books, and for some reason they're doing 3 more books. Honestly, it doesn't have to be that long, in my opinion. I dare say it doesn't even need books 3 or 4, and they could have been mashed down into 1 book together, and it would be way more cohesive and meaningful. I might still read the next 3 books just because I've gotten this far, but I'm so tired. That last book was like 600 or 700 pages, and it took me so long to get through because it was just so convoluted and messy. Boy Parts by Eliza Clark was fine. I think I do still want to read Penance. It just kind of read like a pretentious 2014 Tumblr blog, which I'm aware is kind of the point, but I just found it to be kind of annoying, and it made the story really drag for me. I thought the commentary throughout about how women can be violent and no one bats an eye because they're women was thoughtful, as it was examined through the continuous actions and fucked up things that the FMC does in this book. I don't really like how it was glossed over that she accidentally made child porn, because she is an erotic photographer who puts men in the more typically feminine sexual poses, and it is during these shoots as well as her own outside sexual encounters that this kind of violence comes out of her. She assaults all kinds of men and almost gets assaulted herself, and then wonders why she keeps getting away with it, wonders why the men keep coming back. I liked it overall, but she was just so whiny and pretentious that I really just could not wait to be done reading it. Rouge by Mona Awad is the first book that I've read by this author. It's very focused on the beauty and skincare industry. I thought it had a really good commentary on the self-obsession one can have with their own reflection. The FMC would consistently watch herself in reflections as she kind of sinks deeper into this skincare cult that her mother had been in, while simultaneously uncovering what had led her there in the first place. The relationship she had with her mom and Tom Cruise. It talks about jealousy. I envy is a common phrase in this cult. It did feel pretty repetitive as the FMC spirals and becomes mindless as she partakes in the treatment routine. With each one, she loses a little bit more of herself and what makes her unique. She experiences hallucinations, she's followed around a mansion by a giant red jellyfish, and so the stream of consciousness staccato style of the writing that the book took up for a large portion of it was kind of just hard for me to read. I liked learning about her relationship with her mom. As someone with mommy issues herself, it kind of hurt me a little bit, but it was also very real. if that makes sense. Then I read The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi, and I am so sorry, but I was not a huge fan of this one. I gave it like a 3. I am not a big fan of overly flowery purple language in books. Typically, I don't super mind it, and it just takes me a little bit longer to read. But with this book, I was stopping like every couple of lines, being like, what does this mean? Or having to manually think about each word in relation to the other to understand what she was trying to say. I think that's what made it unenjoyable for me. I'm not saying it was like the worst book I've ever read. I'm not saying that this style of writing can't be enjoyable for people, but that being said, it also was just not really what I was wanting out of it. The bridegroom is only ever called the bridegroom. He and Indigo have an immediate and attraction that's like the level of Morticia and Gomez within the first few sentences of meeting. I didn't find his point of view to be that enjoyable or exciting as I did Azul's point of view. While the bridegroom is focused on Indigo's present and delving into her past, we learn through Azul what Indigo was like as a child and how they shaped each other's lives. I liked the complex relationship between Azul and her mother as she navigates life with her disgusting stepdad. I also liked watching how Azul and Indigo became the same person and then ultimately separated into their own beings, and how cataclysmic that separation was. I just remember reading this one and being like 15 pages towards the end and thinking while I was reading that I could just put it down and not think about it again. Especially at the ending, that should be the most gripping for me at least. I did give this book to my sister for Christmas, and I know you're watching this, and I did not give it to you because I didn't like it. I honestly thought that you would like it. I promise. I still have like a bunch of books to go through though, so I'm going to keep going. I really liked The Immortal Dark by Tigist Girma. It was really gory, and the FMC is like so angry and vengeful, and that's just not something that I've read with a female main character in a long time. I have also never read something that really felt like enemies to lovers. These two were absolutely vile towards each other. Even still, there's like so much chemistry between them. I also love the way that Girma differentiated her vampires and their relationship with humans in this book. I thought that was really interesting. Basically, the vampires can only feed from the family members of the house that they inhabit. I think there's 12 houses, if I'm remembering correctly. There are like secret societies and secret tour groups inside these societies. She's looking for her abducted sister and harboring her own terrible secret and having to uncover a mystery left over by her parents while not allowing the only vampire that serves her family to be in the position to inherit the house, and he would have been the first ever vampire to inherit a house and the power that comes with it. I do want to mention that Kidon, the FMC, is 18 and Susenyos is 300 years old. I'm not a huge fan of this. I really don't see why Kidon couldn't have been just aged up. It felt very higher education, college-esque, like it is dark academia. So I was kind of surprised to find out that this was a YA book, because to be honest, it did not feel like one when I was reading it. I didn't like look at an age rating for it whenever I picked it up. I picked it up because the cover was interesting, but Kidon especially feels more mature than an 18-year-old in my opinion. There are no explicit scenes in this, but there are scenes where I'm like, because it's so steamy. Basically, There is a relationship dynamic between the vampires and the humans that they can feed on, because wherever they bite the human elicits a different memory for both the biter and the receiver. And it was very erotic, but not explicitly erotic because it's YA, which is fine. I just would have liked it to be an adult book, which I'm pretty sure it was supposed to have been from what I've read. But anyway, I'm excited for the second one. I'm going to be reading it, especially with everything that ramped up at the end there. 5 stars. Then I read The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I'm not gonna lie, from the name of this book, I thought it was going to be more culty, surrealist, kind of like My Throat and Open Grave. This was definitely a cover buy for me. It did take me a little bit to get into it, I think like 70 pages, but then I absolutely flew through the rest of it. It almost felt kind of like a character study in a way, but there are so many characters and different points of view. It flows from past to present, with the same family losing a child in both timelines, so it kind of weaves those siblings together. There's the obvious divide of the uber wealthy family living atop a summer camp for equally wealthy families who employ the people of the town to work for them. There's also talk about how that influential family moved in and basically made the entire town depend on them for their income, and I think they replaced some kind of factory or something. I can't quite remember, but there are a bunch of schemes between the characters. The first female investigator to be part of this scene, who is also wanting to move out of her house before marriage. This book is set in like the 50s and I believe 60s. Keep that in mind also, because there is a commentary on like how wealthy women are expected to behave and be used by their male counterparts and their fathers. There was also a murderer running around that I wasn't a super fan of, but if you've read it, you know why. But if you haven't read it, I don't want to spoil it. Anyway, then I read Someone You Can Build a Nest In, a debut novel by John Wiswell. This was a cute sapphic horror paranormal romance. It follows Shishishen, who is a shape-shifting monster. Basically, her hibernation is interrupted and she finds out that she's being hunted for cursing this family, and disguises herself as a human to figure out why, because she definitely didn't curse anyone. I've never read about shapeshifters like this though, because basically she's like this anamorphous blob who can absorb humans and therefore kind of eat them and use their bones or like metal objects to form inside of her and form herself into whatever she wants. So, for example, she uses this like long metal chain as a spine and sometimes keeps a bear claw inside her chest that she does use. And there are a few scenes where you're scared of her being discovered, especially when she doesn't have the parts she needs to really pass as a human. So I think that was a really fun addition to this story as a whole, and it really keeps her as a type of other being, as she's having these really human emotions and thoughts and feelings about her partner, Homily. There's that fun aspect of watching a non-human creature comment on human social customs and norms that was funny. Her and Homily's relationship is very cute. Is it Homily or Homily? All of these characters have odd names. Her and Homily's relationship is very cute. The conflict stems from Homily being the daughter of the Baroness, who is the one who claims that the monster cursed their family and is hunting Shishishen. Shishishen also coincidentally ate the Baroness's son and Homily's brother, because he's the one who disturbed her hibernation at the beginning. So Shishin is having to grapple with the knowledge that she ate Omali's brother and is using his skull for her own face. And as the novel goes on, she starts questioning if love is really her having to lay eggs in Omali's chest, because she is finding that she really does not want to do that. This book was cute, it was gross. I did think some of the characters were a little flat, even Omali herself, but I don't really want to give anything away to tell you why. I might talk about this a little bit later, but there is a cute, very satisfying epilogue at the end though. So I really like this one. I gave it a 4 stars, and I'm excited to see what this author puts out next. Then I read A Dark and Drowning Tide, which is my first Allison Saff novel. I really enjoyed the world building and the folklorist aspect of the main character, and I really liked the academic enemies to lovers aspect of it also, which this enemies to lovers is not like Kadan and Susenyos in Immortal Dark. They are not that mean to each other. In fact, Lorelai honestly is just mean to Sylvia throughout the book, and then a switch flips and they love each other, which I wasn't a huge fan of that part. There's a murder mystery in here also, and it was kind of cool until you know what's going on, but you can tell like she's trying to distract you, but you already know. And then I really did not vibe with the ending of the book, because they just kept talking about how the king is dangerous because his father conquered all of them because they all used to be friends when they were children growing up together, except Lorelai, who is discriminated against for being Yeva, which from my understanding mirrors anti-Semitic rhetoric. But after the plot of the book, nothing is done about their grievances with no longer being the, I guess, royalty of their kingdoms, because they're all part of one kingdom now. But they're like, oh well, we used to be friends with the king when we were children and he's not a bad guy, even though his dad overtook all of them and he's not granting any of them their former freedoms. But I guess this is kind of a spoiler because it's the ending, so skip to this time if you don't want to hear it. But basically, Lorelai works for the king in the same position her murdered mentor kept and hated, and was trying to leave, and she just kind of works for him. And Sylvia is running her homeland to keep her people from rioting under the leadership of the king. And then, that is to say, like I said earlier, the romance kind of fell off because Lorelai had a weird obsession hatred with Sylvia until she didn't. And this was like a while after Sylvia proclaimed her love for Lorelai. Like, it was several chapters after that she's like, oh yeah, I do love you, actually. And then there is a mild sex scene, and I was just kind of like, is this the time to be doing this? Because it doesn't feel like it. But this got a 3 from me, and I might try another one of her books. I'm not sure when though. If you do like her stuff, let me know which ones to check out. And then I read Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. I loved this. No notes. I barely want to tell you anything about it because I want you to read it and I want you to be surprised. I will be reading Sword of Kaigen in 2025. Blood Over Brighthaven has such a cool magic system. It's basically like coding, and I don't know anything about coding, and I thought I wasn't going to understand anything about how the magic system works in this book, but it's so easily explained with the academic setting, and there's so much commentary on like feminism and classism and traditional gender roles, and then if it's intention or impact that makes you a good person, and the powerful wealthy class men keeping secrets from the lower classes, and is a standalone book. Love that part of it because I was like at the middle and we had already reached the point that I thought I would be like 80% in. So the whole time I didn't know what was going to happen. It was magnificent. There is a little bit of romance that I didn't care for, but it really did not impact the book in a way that would change my rating of it or change my love of it. Then I read Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. This was good. I gave it 5 stars, but honestly I'm going to give it a 4 simply for the fact that looking back on it, it wasn't really that life-changing for me. I read it, I sat with it, I liked it enough to give it 5 stars, but what did I really like about it? It has a disturbing concept that's executed well. It brought up commentary on how we treat our animals when they're raised for food and how this society would treat minority groups that they want to eat badly. This book follows a man who works as kind of like a middleman for a tannery. So he sells what this society calls heads because they use typical animal language for their meat industry in this, since they can't eat any form of animal at all. He also will sell like pregnant women and athletic men to this hunting range area. There is human experimentation and gene manipulation, and they're able to grow some of them quickly, kind of like they do for chickens, etc. It literally just pumps all of this disturbing, disgusting stuff at you to desensitize you to the reality, which honestly works. At the end there, I was kind of like, this doesn't surprise me. I've seen worse. I will let you know that there's a pretty gruesome scene involving some puppies. I did have to take a pretty long break after reading that part. I haven't even really gotten around to telling you about the rules about owning your own stock, or what the main character does with his own female head, which he's gifted, but I'm sure it's not outside the realm of your imagination what I would have to say about this. It's a solid read. I still have more books to talk about, so I'm just gonna get on with it because I'm sure someone else has talked about this in depth. Then I read Big Swiss by Jen Began. I have seen a lot of people talk about this, and it was so fun. Basically, we follow 40-something-year-old Greta as she transcribes this small town's sex therapy sessions, and she begins meeting the clients of this therapist around the town. She meets this woman who she dubs Big Swiss, and she has been enthralled with this woman since the beginning. And they begin an affair, and there is a large emphasis on how different we view our own traumas and how, depending on that trauma, it can be used as a sort of shield from consequences. This book kind of makes you feel like a fly on the wall because you know so many intimate details about these people and they're so weird. And Greta is so weird. There are points where I was just kind of like, why would you say that? Because there's literally a scene, okay, he meets this couple who both go and see this therapist. And so she knows that this girl is a kleptomaniac. And whenever she gets stressed, she sees Patrick Bateman in her head. And so while they're talking, this girl and her partner are like getting weed from Greta's roommate. Greta literally just looks at her and said, you kind of look like Patrick Bateman. Why would you say that? There are so many of these here, and it's so fun, especially as she has this kind of unknown power over Big Swiss because she transcribes her therapy sessions. I super recommend this one. This got a 5 from me. It's just a really good time. Then I read Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. This book was a deep character study on the different forms of addictions and the bonds between sisters. It hurt so bad, especially as an eldest sister. I really empathized with Avery in the feelings of having to be strong for the younger siblings at all times, especially in times of grief. These three sisters are really just coping with the hole left by the fourth one in different ways. I thought it was a very realistic look in the dynamic of sisterhood and how even when the tie becomes thin as life goes on, it doesn't break indefinitely. I did give this one 4 stars. I'm really excited to look into other books by this author. I'm excited to read Cleopatra and Frankenstein this year. So let me know how you guys like that one if you've read it. I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. Honestly, this one was 6 stars, S tier. I loved this book. I will be buying a nice copy to display on my bookshelf. It's really short. It follows a girl who grew up in a cage with a group of 39 other older women. She's the only one who is very young at the time of them being, captured. These women don't know what happened to them, but you get to watch the main character, who is unnamed in this story, grow from around her early pubescent years into a woman with these other women. And you get to see kind of what their dynamic would be like with someone who has never known life as we know it. The only men she has contact with isn't even really contacted because they are just guards that pace around the cage and don't speak. And then one day, as they're being passed their food for lunch, they are suddenly free. The men are gone. And what does the world look like above their bunker, if there's even one at all? It's hard to put my feelings and emotions into words about this one. I don't want to get super into it because, like I said, it's not that long and it's really just nothing like I've ever read before. Everyone is right about this one, honestly. Then I was recommended My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon. I don't know, I can't pronounce her last name. I am so sorry. I didn't like this one. I think I gave it like a 2.5. I felt like it was fitting because it had a Christmas setting and I read it during December, but the main characters just felt really flat and I couldn't identify with her. It could have been the writing style that I didn't super mesh with either, but I only really grew interested in the story around the 80% mark and then it pissed me off. So it basically goes exactly how you think it will. It had some cool elements like unpacking why her mother was so cruel and different with her all the time, but it was kind of like, in my opinion, a little unrealistic that someone who suffered that kind of abuse, even if their mom is so old and about to die, why would you let that person into your home around your own children? Just my opinion, I wouldn't have done it. I thought it was unrealistic. I just didn't like it. It wasn't for me. Then I did read the 3rd edition Introduction of Critical Race Theory by Richard Delgado and Jean Sevensick. Did take me a really long time to read, honestly, because I kind of had to read it in spurts when I was in the headspace to be able to focus and understand what it was saying. This is quite literally legal theory that goes into discrimination and racial biases in the legal system. It has lists of recommended texts and references, actual cases, as well as has questions that you can reflect on by yourself or with others at the end of the chapters. It's the first time I've ever read anything like this, so I did not give it a rating because it's specifically nonfiction legal theory and that didn't feel like something I would be qualified to really rate. I did think that it presented its ideas and theories in an easy to understand and digestible way, It fostered a lot of good conversations between me and my husband, and now I have a better basis on what critical race theory is for when that kind of keyword is thrown around, especially in the book banning aspect. If you've been hearing the critical race theory as a kind of thrown around keyword, I definitely recommend taking the time to look into it, even if it's not this book specifically. Then I was also recommended Friday Black by Nana Kwame, Ajay, Brenya. This is a set of short stories featuring a lot of different ideas. There's one where a white man gets away with chainsawing 5 young black children because he feared for his safety. There's stories on consumerism and how people have regressed societal niceties for Black Friday and deals in general. There's a story on school shootings, and also there's one on a virtual simulator that allows typically older white men to pay to murder black men on the streets of a virtual suburb as like a safety course or something. Also, a more surrealist story about like tiny aborted babies that you can hold in your hand and talk to, which I imagine took the form of that like picture that everyone uses for like fetuses. And while a few of the stories went over my head, I thought this was a really solid short story collection and did give it 4 stars. My last book of the year was Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austin. It felt a little lackluster. There was a lot of cool elements that I really liked, like what makes people family, having to take care of parents with mental illness, dealing with phobias and your own mental illness, relationship commitment issues that stem from feeling that you're secretly a bad person or manipulating the people around you. There was also the stressful addition of the FMC seeing signs that she's being stalked and absolutely smashing into the deep pit of her paranoia from that, while also dealing with the complicated feelings about a dead father who left her when she was young and worrying about her mother's feelings when she spends time with her half-siblings. He did leave them to start a family with someone else. The reason this only got 3 stars from me was because the ending tied everything into a kind of neat little full stop bow, and I was kind of just expecting a little more from it. The ending kind of just felt like a stop, if that makes sense. That and the relationship she has with her love interest felt a little bit odd to me at the end, but that would also kind of be a spoiler, so I'm not going to get into that right now. Alrighty, so there are 35 of the 40 books that I read for 2024. I like to make loose sets of books that I plan on reading for the month, so here we go for January 2025. I have finished reading Three Women by Lisa Taddeo. It was so good, but I'm going to go over that in another video later. I am wanting to finish the last 2 books from the Ember in the Ashes series, and then I'm currently reading The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, and I'm going to be reading another one of her books this month in another one of my book groups. So that will be 5 books for this month. I don't know if I'll actually get them done or not, but I guess we'll see when I wrap that up later. My reading goal for 2025 is going to be another 40 books since I barely finished that last year. There was like 2 months that I just didn't read anything at all, and a couple more where I read like 1 or 2 books, and I don't feel like stressing myself out over something that I love doing. But anyway, thank you for spending time with me with my first video. I hope to be doing this for a while. Let me know if you liked any of the books or didn't like any of the books in the comments, and I'm excited to see you in the next one. Thank you.